Models are now calling for major development, and millions of people could be at risk. What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Hat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. All right, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a few things that we're going to be discussing with you today. We have our first tropical depression in the East Pacific we're going to be talking about. We have two other areas of interest that are hugging the coast of Central America and Mexico that we're going to be talking about. And we're also seeing some models that might be showing either some carryover effect or some tropical development happening in parts of the Gulf. So we have a lot to discuss with you today. It's going to be another one of those very action-packed videos that we've been having the last few days. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off with the National Hurricane Center, we're going to touch up on this a little bit. We have our first tropical depression of the hurricane season, the East Pacific hurricane season, at least. Tropical Depression 1E currently has maximum sustained winds of 35 miles per hour at the current point. Let's go ahead and see if that's changed. No, it hasn't. 35 miles per hour minimum central pressure. 1,007 millibars, located at 10.2 degrees north, 127.4 west, and it is moving northwest at 6 miles per hour. So it's relatively slow moving at this current point. If we go ahead and briefly discuss this real quickly, let's go ahead and take a quick look at this once again. We'll take a quick gander at the discussion real quickly. They're expecting the peak to be at 65 miles per hour at this current point in time, although we have seen some estimates, at least privately. I've been talking to some people about it, and this could potentially be like a short-lived hurricane due to the fact that it's moving a little bit slower than expected, and it's still over relatively warm water regardless. So ultimately, that's what we're looking at this current point in time. We're also watching these two areas of interests as well in part that are hugging the Central America coast, as well as parts of Mexico over here. This is the area of interest that I've been paying attention to the last few days, and we're going to go ahead and talk about this. This is the area of interest extending from Costa Rica all to the way to near the Gulf of Tehuantepec over here. So let's go ahead and move this over slightly and read this advisory out for you guys right now. An area of low pressure is forecast to form offshore of Central America and southern Mexico late this week. Environmental conditions appear conducive for development of the system thereafter, and a tropical depression could form late this weekend or early next week while it moves slowly northwestward or northward. This is now a 0-50 chance, so it has a 0% chance of formation in the next 48 hours and a 50% in the next 7 days. Those chances have continued to gradually increase, so we're now up to 0-50 right now. And 0-50 may not seem that much, but in my opinion, this looks like a scary 0-50 based on the kind of ceiling that the system ultimately has, and it's something we're going to want to pay attention to, especially if the system starts to get its act together maybe a little earlier than anticipated. You're not going to see too much wind shear. You're not going to see too much dry air. You're going to have plenty of warm water for the system to really get its act together, up to 32 degrees Celsius in some areas. So it's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to for the long term. And we also have this area of interest now that's hugging from the Gulf of Tehuantepec all the way through Oaxaca and a few other areas in Mexico as well. So let's go ahead and talk about this very quickly. An area of low pressure is forecast to form offshore of southern and southwestern Mexico early next week. Environmental conditions could allow for some gradual development of the system thereafter, while it slowly moves generally northward. 20% chance of formation in the next 7 days. So this is another area of interest that they have just recently tagged. So things are already off to a pretty explosive start on the Eastern Pacific, and based on the way things may go or may not go, there might be some carryover effect into the Atlantic. So with that being said, let's go ahead and check on our ensembles right here, and we'll go ahead and start discussing those. So moving through here, let's go ahead and go to the EPAC real quickly. This is we'll shift over to the European as well. But here's what we got right here. This is what we have for what will eventually become Tropical Storm Amanda, starting off right here, kind of getting its act together, remaining relatively weak, though, according to the European ensembles. At this current point in time, it's definitely something that we're going to want to pay attention to. It's mainly going to be short, not necessarily like the longest lived. It's going to be relatively short-lived, and it's going to be relatively weak. I mean, 60 miles per hour, if you're the average person, that seems like a lot, but in terms of tropical storm strength, especially out here in the Atlantic, that's not particularly that much. Now, once we get up to like 70 or 75 or 80 miles per hour, now we start talking a little bit of business over there. But in terms of what's going on with future Amanda, overall, I'm not necessarily too concerned about this. And I think for right now, I think maybe a strong tropical storm, maybe a weak hurricane could come out of this if the system continues to get its act together, because this system is actually ahead of schedule based on what we've seen with satellite and based on what I have seen with how the system has developed so far. So that's kind of something that I'm paying attention to, but I'm also more so paying attention to this whole area over here. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this. So as we zoom in on this, here's what we are looking at right here. We're looking at two potentially distinct areas of development, this one further to the east, this one further to the west. And this area further to the east has more power potential because you have a tropical wave or a system developing off the Central American Gyre. It's already going to be moving through very warm waters and very low wind shear, and once it starts doing that, it's projected to start slowly but surely getting its act together. And I have a feeling that once this system develops, it's going to be potentially a pretty strong system relatively quickly. I'm thinking maybe a little bit of quick strengthening with this happening. I'm not saying rapid intensification is going to happen. This system's only an invest right now. We don't even have this designated. Well, it's not even an invest right now. It's just an area of interest designated by the NHC. But regardless of that, you have a lot of power potential with this. And let's go ahead and go to 6 days out to kind of emphasize that, yeah, you're seeing a lot of pop associated with this. 951, 978, 986, 1006, all pretty strong ensembles with this system going forward. And then as we go ahead and go to 8 days out, you're definitely noticing some this kind of hugging the coast quite a bit for sure. Definitely noticing a bit more of a situation where this system could actually make landfall according to the European. It's been moving slowly closer and closer and closer and closer to the Mexican coast as well as the Central American coast as well. So definitely the concern for impacts are very possible for potentially millions of people that are going to be live in these regions and are taking vacation in these regions at this current point or scheduled to get down there. So this is something that we're going to want to pay attention to, especially due to its proximity to the coast. And let's go ahead and also pop up the GFS ensembles as well. GFS is also kind of interesting as well. Definitely starting to catch up with the power for the European ensembles, I'm noticing as well. And you're also noticing more ensembles potentially heading towards land. Definitely noticing potential landfall in Guatemala, potential areas around the Gulf of Tehuantepec and the Oaxaca region as well in Mexico. So it's definitely something that you're going to want to keep an eye on and pay attention to moving forward. For sure, and we can go ahead and even go to 9 days out as well to see how this is going. So what the GFS is kind of forecasting here is one of two scenarios for the most part. Either it's going to hug the coast all the way from Central America through much of Mexico and eventually drift out to sea, or it's going to make landfall around the Gulf of Tehuantepec. That's more of a wild card scenario right there, and potentially head into the Gulf region and cause some carryover effect over there. So those are the two scenarios that we're paying attention to at this current point in time, and it's something that we're going to need to pay attention to and keep you updated on here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But shifting over a little bit, we're going to be pivoting over to our operational models right now. We're going to go ahead and shift over to the Western Atlantic and kind of give you a good view of that. So this is what the situation is at hand. We have the 0Z operational model. We're going to be both talking about this as well as this system in the EPAC, as well as what might be happening in the Gulf region as well. So here's what we got for you guys right here, and this has definitely been an interesting trend that I have noticed with this. So here's the European. You have system over here starting to slowly get its act together, starting after 4 days out, I would say, and then from that point on, you have the system starting to slowly organize, get its act together. Already seeing that with the operational run right here. You're also seeing this area of right here that I'm paying attention to. So potentially 2 tropical cyclones are going to be coming out of this, and that's why the NHC designated another area of interest. So ultimately, you have this system further to the west. That's the more pre-existing one. It remains relatively weak, a bit weaker compared to what I've seen from the ensembles as well. 995 is nothing to scoff at, though. That's potentially hurricane strength, potentially hugging the coast of Mexico. But you have this 1,002 millibar system slowly consolidating, slowly getting its act together, and eventually it starts to ramp up in intensity, potentially to a low-end Category 1 strength as well. And then eventually it starts to really hug the coast of Mexico and then make landfall near Guatemala. And then from what you see here, and this is going to be definitely a little important, although this is relatively far out. By the time we get to this point, this is June 13th, so this will be next weekend. But ultimately, what you are noticing with this is you're definitely noticing the kind of the remnants of the remnant low of this moving through parts of Central America, kind of carrying over into the Gulf of, and not the Gulf, but the Gulf region over here, but also the Bay of Campeche as well. And then you start seeing the system start to slowly organize and consolidate over there. But keep in mind, this is 300 hours out at this current point, and this is the 0Z European, and you have the system really starting to ramp up and potentially get up to hurricane strength before heading towards Florida. Am I going to sit here and say that Florida is going to get a hurricane in mid-June? No, absolutely not. This is just the European model right here. It's one run. Please take it with a massive grain of salt. Yes, the European is the most reliable model of the kind of the operational runs, but it is one mile run. Although there is an interesting tidbit with this, and I'll show you what I mean by it. This is the 12Z of the European. That was run yesterday. Had a similar situation right here, so definitely noticing kind of a bit of a shift or a trend, at least kind of with the European for right now. Let's go ahead and move out to about 10 days out. So you have this system over here in Central America that starts to kind of carry over into parts of the Atlantic over here, into parts of the Gulf region moving forward. You kind of have that system kind of trying to develop, but then it makes landfall too early, and then moves into the Bay of Campeche, and then starts to organize and potentially consolidate. It does take its time doing so, but you definitely are noticing a pretty significant low pressure system over here, potentially of tropical nature, heading towards the Gulf Coast. So this is the second time we have noticed this from the European. The 12Z was definitely a lot weaker and definitely more of a one-off right here, but the 0Z, though, has definitely gotten interesting. It's really ramped up on the power, and it's ramped up kind of on how things have gone in the East Pacific. I do want to emphasize something, though. I would like to emphasize that this is kind of based on what's going to be happening in the next week and a half over in the Eastern Pacific. So if we do have something forming in the Atlantic, it's going to be originating from the Eastern Pacific Ocean and crossing over the Central American Isthmus and moving into the Gulf region. I do want to make that 100% expressly clear with that right there, just to kind of show you that, okay, yes, we're seeing something happening over here, but ultimately it's a situation that we're going to want to watch, and it's going to depend on what's happening on the other side of Central America. So with that being said, I am kind of curious on this model run right here, and I am kind of curious, and I want to take a quick gander at our wind shear and our dry air aspect of it, because water temperatures are absolutely going to be very roaring by that point, and they already are starting to heat up quite a bit, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I do want to take a look at the wind shear and the dry air first. So here is our wind shear for you guys right here. Definitely a lot weaker at 10 days out compared to what we have seen previously in both previous runs and based on what we've been seeing earlier this month. It's kind of more of your wild card setup for the western half of the Atlantic Ocean over here. But ultimately, as we get to where the system starts to emerge off of Central America and into the Bay of Campeche over here, you are noticing a little bit of not necessarily wind shear. You are seeing quote unquote shear right here, but that's mainly from the outflow of the system starting to get its act together. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to pay attention to. But across much of the Gulf, according to this run, there is very little shear potentially stopping this at this current point if this developed by this current point and these models held. And then as the system starts to continue to get its act together from here, you're noticing less shear. The only time it runs into shear is once it gets into this boundary over here in the deep south, and that will definitely be interesting. And if it hits at the right angle, theoretically, that would be very good for tornadoes on top of this potential system. Not trying to scare anybody with that threat, but it's definitely something interesting to note and something to keep in mind. So you have the system starting to get its act together, kind of hugs the trough angle quite a bit according to this run. Maybe it's a little exaggerated in my opinion in terms of how quickly it intensifies, but it makes landfall in the Florida Panhandle. But overall, there's not much shear that's going to be in its way until it heads towards land. Then as we get to main sea level, not main sea level pressure, I want to look at the moisture component to all of this. As it continues to load. Perfect. Here's the moisture component to this. Yes, it does. There is some dry air into kind of in the northwestern quadrant of the Gulf over here, but it's mixable dry air for the most part. And as long as the system consolidates and gets its act together and kind of fights off this dry air, kind of helped by what's happening in the deep south, this system definitely is in a good moisture pocket to get its act together, quickly organize, and strengthen as it moves towards the Gulf. Keep in mind, this is by mid-June. This is June 15th when this is going on. I'm just merely exploring the possibility of this system actually taking place right here. The conditions, the dynamics, the mesoscale, and the synoptic meteorology definitely pans out with this. And my experience in the tropics definitely has seen this happen for sure. But ultimately, what I will say about this is very far out. Things are obviously very subject to change with this, and it's definitely something we're going to continue to monitor, and I will continue to keep you updated on here at the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But lastly, let's go ahead and shift over to our water temperatures and our ocean heat content. Here is our water temperatures for you guys right here. If this system were to emerge off the East Pacific, go through these 30 degrees Celsius waters, and then emerge in the Bay of Campeche, already we're looking at least, if it were to happen today, 29 degrees Celsius water temperatures in that region. That is 84 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you who live in the United States and those who live in her territories. Ultimately, you're looking at 28 to 29 degrees Celsius waters across the Gulf. That's about 82 to 84 degrees Fahrenheit for those living in the U.S. That is more than warm enough for tropical development, and that is more than warm enough for strengthening as well. And another thing that I have noticed, and I can even show you this map right here, is we're definitely noticing a bit of a change in terms of our anomalies right here. Some warm, some cold, but look at the main development region. This is kind of on a bit of a tangent right here, but look at the main development region. It's already starting to heat up pretty considerably compared to what we've seen even a week ago. Yes, there's parts of the Gulf that has started to kind of dip below average, but even parts of the Caribbean are starting to dip into the more above average frame. So overall, you're definitely noticing the Atlantic really starting to heat up, and that's especially going to continue throughout June and throughout July. So that's what we're paying attention to going on. And then we'll go ahead and show you the ocean heat content. OHC continues to be a bit of a concern for me. Emerges off the Bay of Campeche, already 50 to 75 OHC this early in the season in that region right there. 50 to 75 is decently conducive for some pretty decent strengthening at this current point, and it's definitely a factor that I'm going to have to watch out for, because essentially what's OHC? OHC is how deep is your very warm waters going, And considering that we are already seeing some depth with it attached to it, and it's already June 3rd, it's definitely something to watch out for, and it's something we'll continue to keep you updated on here on the Pat's Pathbreaker channel. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. Link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.